Welcome to Decode Dune, an exegesis of the Dune universe.
Okay, we are recording. I think this is pretty exciting because we made a quasi decision that we're going to release a single unedited version of our video recordings of these only to YouTube, and then obviously people who follow us on Spotify, Stitcher, iTunes, etc., are going to get the edited audio version. But people want to see us, and editing a video is really, really difficult. So hi. Yeah, this is us. You've seen us probably in a couple of the teasers or trailers, but this is us. And then obviously, if you are listening to this, you are not seeing us, but you could migrate over to the YouTube channel at Decode Dune, check it out real quick, and then go right back to Spotify or what have you and listen to us at 1.5 speed, which is what I do. And it makes me feel smart when I hear myself just for like a preview at 1.5 speed. I'm like, I am sharp. And then you put it at regular speed and you're like, no, never mind.
How about like all that gets edited out, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So excited to share all that extra vocalization with everyone.
I need everyone to know I literally changed my t-shirt when I remembered, like, wait, this is going to be seen, right? I don't even know if you could tell the difference, but the t-shirt
what is your t-shirt today?
The t-shirt's it's the Newaza. Shout out to Newaza Apparel. They gave me free clothes to model for them when I was popular in the BJJ scene 2017. It says, if you can read this, you're in my guard.
Oh,
so,
I like it.
Yeah. So just staying up with current events real quick. A lot of 10th planet victories, if we're just going to talk BJJ, at a Emerald City, something. I don't know if you guys saw it on Instagram. Luis Quinones, he was my wrestling teacher, coach, or whatever, for a couple classes there before they changed the schedule of it. He did a nasty shoulder lock to Frank.
Did you go schedule?
Love it. Schedule.
International man of mystery.
Yeah, it looks like he was gonna do a rear naked choke and then said the shoulder was right there, and it looks like I'm gonna have to ask him what that move is, but it looked like it was it's a shoulder lock like that.
I do that quite a bit.
Oh, that's part of your game.
That's a Jeff Hackert signature move.
Oh, okay.
Shout out to Patrick Donabedian, who hates having his shoulder ripped out of its socket.
Yeah.
It's there's two variations. There's like the basket catch Americana. You kind of slip your hand in and you pull it to your chest, and that causes the Americana. And the other is just like hyperextending the arm past the shoulder blade. It's very, very effective.
Yeah. It was sick. Yeah, and Luis has a tenacity for taking and getting the back from probably virtually anywhere.
He is my guard passing hero. I've been watching that. The Mastering the System. I like that game. He has taken Gordon Ryan's sort of guard and Craig Jones's guard passing strategy, the DM strategy, and just turned it into like a nightmare. So I really appreciate the work he does.
Yeah. And then Bree Robertson, who I think I've met once, we did EBI Live drills together. She got a nice, nasty looking toe hold. And then there was some other people.
Comes to our morning class. She and Patrick trained together at Eric Ramey's. And she is tough.
10th Planet Pasadena.
Yeah. You do not want to let. I can't remember how old Brie is, but she's young. And she's super strong. And in general, my experience with the women at 10th Planet is you don't want to let them touch your feet. I know there's the stereotypical view that women are nurturing and loving, and I'm certain that that's true with all the 10th Planet women. But when they get a hold of you in a jujutsu context, it can be very difficult. And they
tenacious.
Tenacious. And zero fucks about what happens to your feet, legs, whatever.
Shout out to Eric Ramey at 10th Planet Pasadena. He taught a fantastic leg lock class at HQ on Sundays, and then he stopped teaching that when they opened Pasadena. So
He
Yeah.
is a wizard.
Yeah.
Not to take anything away from Ryan Hall, also a wizard, but
Yeah.
but Raimi
Yeah.
is like I don't know what to call him, like the scientist. It's crazy.
Yeah.
I wish
Yeah.
I could spend more time up there. If Pasadena could move itself a little bit closer to the ocean,
Mhm.
I would be a happy man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That'd be nice.
Yeah, we could just work on that. Maybe a good earthquake.
Yeah. Just kind of some sort of
take out the center.
Silmarillion, the first age to the second age sort of thing,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
look, I know there's lots of people in the middle between San Pedro and Pasadena who like the way they're situated. And
Yeah.
I'm not wishing them any harm.
Yeah.
But if Pasadena were to accidentally slip, say, into Torrance territory,
Yeah.
it would work out for my jujitsu.
One of the things I've really come to learn in life is the idea that other people and what they want don't really matter compared to what I want.
Well, it's it's good to embrace your inner sociopath. Yeah, once you know, makes life simple, right?
There you go. So I'm
Yeah.
I'm a reptile.
Yeah, American Psycho is not the feel-good hit that you might think it was. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So
Yeah.
should we talk about
Dune.
actual Dune?
That's what they maybe are here for. I'm not sure. Well, that's what all the comments have been. All the comments have actually seemed to be about the. So if we were to take a passive understanding of the feedback we've received, the passive feedback would be people actually only really care about the Dune talk.
Yeah, that's
when
true.
we can link Dune to other things. So
Yeah. Okay,
whatever.
well, there's
so-
yeah, no
all
link.
right. Yeah. So in our edition of Dune, we're on page 106.
Just so people who could see now, literally on page 106.
This is a big, hairy chapter. There is a lot that occurs here. And again, in terms of Frank's writing, this is a lengthy chapter with a lot in it. And some people would say, aren't other chapters like 4 pages and maybe not so much happens, right? And that's an interesting facet of his writing. What's also interesting about this chapter is, well, I want to take a step back and say, so this is going to be an interesting episode in the sense that my process is I definitely try to review the chapters at least 2 days before we cover it. But the way things have happened in our production schedule and my personal life is that I have read this chapter at least 6 times since April. But I got to be honest, I couldn't do it this week. I was like, I've read this chapter. I've prepared for us to do this like 3 times, and now we're finally here today. That's no one's fault. It's more, we want to do the coverage per chapter as needed. And we didn't want to try to squeeze this into 20 minutes a couple weeks ago, but
yeah, I could not do it. It's
I haven't touched this in a couple weeks. So I'm going to kind of try to remember the play-by-play, but I can just say big, hairy chapter. In one of the interesting things is we get so many different, we get at least Leto and Paul's perspective in addition to an omniscient perspective in this, but basically we learn way more about the current state of the operation for spice mining that the Harkonnens left for the Atreides, which would be the Atreides situation. We learn
before we dive into the details. Sorry, I hate to do this. As I sometimes do and want to do more frequently, I have a Rumi quote. To help us dive into this. It's sort of a covering idea. We have placed in you a substance, a seeking, a yearning, and we are watching over it and will not let it be lost, but will bring it to its destined place.
Can you read it one more time?
I can.
I feel like the audience would want that, and I do too.
Yeah. We have placed in you a substance, a seeking, a yearning, and we are watching over it and won't let it be lost, but will bring it to its destined place.
All
right.
Super relevant.
That's it. Okay.
So I feel super relevant in both the context of Paul in his future and also Spice itself.
That's right.
That's my feeling.
We're about to get high.
Ooh. So okay, so we're in Arrakeen on Arrakis. Some of the more recent events have been the Hunter Seeker attack on Paul. And he obviously survived it. Then we had Jessica in the secret garden, finding the letter about the betrayal, and then we have a small dog barking, it sounds like. We have the secret garden thing happened. There's the letter from Count Fenring, Lady Margot Fenring, and so so we're starting to see increasing seeds of discontent sowed between, I don't know if that's the right term. We're starting to see an increasing sense of Hawat thinks it might be Jessica. Jessica thinks, gosh, could it be Hawat? No one suspects Yui. Jessica, in our last episode 8, we talk about Jessica making these assumptions about what other people would do or their thought processes, and are they based, does she have special insight because she's a Bene Gesserit, or women's intuition, or is she just plain wrong and just misattributes what people will do? And so Leto, I think, has had one chapter to be aware of this Hunter Seeker attack. He talks to Gurney. He delegates to Gurney to go and try to recruit some of the spice miners who have recently been told that their tour of duty is done. And obviously the Atreides operation is going to need skilled people. They're shorthanded. So he went to do that. And now we stick with Leto, and Leto is now kind of actually really, in the last chapter, Leto is only thinking about what happened with Paul. He doesn't mention it to Gurney, if I'm not mistaken. It's just this thought in his head. They tried to take the life of my son. They tried to take the life of my son. But now here we are on page 106, and he's actually talking to someone about it. So I'm not going to read the little intro thing. Maybe they'll come up in a bit. But the whole theory of warfare is calculated risk, the Duke said. But when it comes to risking your own family, the element of calculation gets submerged in other things. So I found this to be an interesting quote, right? So he's finally talking about it. He's talking to Paul about it. And he's obviously angry. I what do you think about the element of calculation gets submerged in other things? Do you think that's, he's talking about the oversight, right? As in, well, I'll just,
no, go ahead. Yeah.
I'll say a page and a half later, depending on how you want to look at it, there's this very, to me, strange thing where Hawat comes in, he goes, master, and he doesn't call him master, but he comes in and says, I failed, I must resign immediately, which is very like governmental, right? You hear about people doing that. I've never resigned from a position. I'd be curious what it would be like to have a moment of like, I fucked up, I have to step down. But he does that. And this is just very, I'm super curious about your take on this, Jeff, but Paul has defended Thufir and said, he's taught me a lot. This is one little slip up. He's rarely ever wrong. The Duke is saying, I should be defending him, Paul, not you. And later, or Paul's like, shrug, like, well, changing roles here in this relationship. I'm picking some stuff up. But this is what's interesting. Thufir comes in and goes, my lord, I failed. I must resign. And Duke turns on a dime and is like, don't be crazy. Like, as in, Paul has persuaded him. Don't be crazy. I will not allow you to resign. And this is, I'm just so curious about your thoughts on this, Jeff. If you made a mistake, it was overestimating the Harkonnens. Their simple minds came up with a simple trick. We didn't count on simple tricks. Now, there's a little bit more to the comment after that, but there's a part of me that's like, I can't wrap my finger around like, oh, well, I mean, like, there's something kind of great. Like, it's like, oh, how convenient. There's something like that. I'm going to say, Leto, your mind is scrambled eggs in this moment. Like I mean, it's true, but also like, it's just, I'm going to let you jump in because I'm at literally a loss for words how fucking just weird it is that it's like, oh yeah, I mean, he could have been killed, but
well, I don't read it exactly that way.
Okay.
I think so when mistakes are made,
yeah,
you don't want people to over index
Mm-hmm.
On the fact that they made a mistake. You don't really want to destroy people's confidence. Mistakes, tactical mistakes, tactical errors. I think we had to talk about this at one point, but if not, I'll dig into it a little bit. But there's this concept of like sort of the everyday disasters.
Mm-hmm.
These are sort of the mistakes in execution, the small tactical errors, setbacks. In warfare, this is a constant. This is as a matter of fact, if we take it out of the war setting for a second, when we talk about like learning, this is what we mean. So like, I know we probably bring everything back to jujitsu, but I was working with somebody yesterday, and I was standing, they were on their butts, and I was doing a lot of like, so they wanted to enter like shin to shin or something. They wanted to get underneath me. And I'm working my sort of leg pummeling DMs game. And so I kept entering and then backing. I'd pummel, make it really difficult for them. And then I'd back up and do it again. I got what I wanted, which is I got them to over-index on the kind of complexity that they were having to face, right? And as soon as I knew that they were going to respond again to this leg pummeling game, I just dove over for a Kimura, and it was done. And so when I think about, and I don't know if this makes sense to anybody, but except jujitsu players, but the point is I did something very simple and it was completely unexpected. It's not that a Kimura is unexpected in jujitsu, but he wasn't expecting me to just sort of wrap and roll over him. So he was so focused on like fighting this leg game that he wasn't paying attention to his upper body, which is what I want. Right. So when I think about this idea, I think this is exactly what you're supposed to do as a leader. Do you want people to pay attention to like and do the best in every aspect? Of course you do. And you can't really, you have to expect that mistakes are going to happen, that so tactical errors are going to occur.
Okay.
And then you don't want to berate or punish too severely because that destroys people's confidence. So he wants to move forward and keep his team intact. And I think that's what he's referring to here.
Do you think that means he was sincere about, like, do you think he was just angry and was not going to dismiss him, or do you think Paul persuaded him back from the edge of that cliff, so to speak?
I think it's a little bit of everything. So was he angry in the moment? Sure.
Yeah.
Like you've dealt with this before. Like you uncover some huge mistake. At first, you're really frustrated. Why are you frustrated? Because there's like, what does this cover? Is it going to impact? How far are we set back? Like, why weren't you paying attention? You have like, just get mad, right? But then if you take a step back, you're like, okay, what is my objective now? You may decide that you need the people around you.
This is interesting analysis. I think my read on it, I can't even say what the first time would have been, first time, second time, but the most recent reading, I think, is sort of like, because I know what happens in a later chapter with Leto, where I think he really is kind of acting a fool. I think there's a part of me that found this to be almost like a cartoonish sort of way of handling it, right? I don't know. Yeah, it's maybe it's just kind of, I could be wrong. Maybe it's just sort of a foreshadowing of, I mean, but I guess your point is, like, things are going to happen. One of the things I talk about in our line of work in software is really getting accustomed to the idea that some bugs are just going to happen, and that the user, I correct me if I'm wrong, but this is an example of the not being super familiar with it, is some bugs are going to happen and everyone who's using it is accustomed to that. Like, they expect that, they accept that, but there's maybe a limit to how much or how little there would be. So I'm always in this weird place of tension with our customers or our clients, which is how much is going to be normal to them and how much is going to be, we need to start making apologies, or we need to start really working with people in terms of like we've gone past the expected challenge of upgrading to a new version, or the new version was released and sort of there might be some bugs, right?
Well,
And
so actually it's interesting. So let's talk about Clausewitz for a minute.
go about what?
Clausewitz.
Clausewitz.
Yeah, Clausewitz. Yeah. So German.
Okay.
You should be really good at this pronunciation. So he we're just talking about theory. We're really talking about theory of war. So if we go back to the very first statement, the whole theory of warfare is calculated risk.
Right.
That is a perspective that I think that many people would share. Clausewitz
is it a German guy named Klaus? Last name Witz?
No, his last name is Klaus.
Oh, Clausewitz. Okay.
Yeah, it's all one word. Yeah, the Germans love to jam words together.
Yeah.
So he wrote a book called Vom Krieg.
Okay.
Well, he wrote it. He didn't really finish it, but it's his jam.
Mm-hmm.
And he influenced both the Nazis and their and their sort of attack strategy when they in World War II. He of course was World War I and prior, maybe even.
I mean, Germany just had barely unified right before World War I.
I think actually Clausewitz fought what's his face. Anyway, we could talk more about Clausewitz's history in a minute, but let's just talk about what he has to say here. So Clausewitz has this idea that it's this that war is a sustained act of violence. Are you okay? Is it my pronunciation that's killing you?
No. Okay. When you were like, when I was like, what is that? And then I asked you to say it again. And then I was like a little puzzled, and you were like, you should, something with the pronunciation. I literally thought, okay, so because of our role in business, I literally thought you were like, this is a software testing concept that you should know by now.
No.
And I was like,
no,
I'm always so behind in terms of what I need to know about the world of IT and cloud computing. Is I don't know Clausewitz. I don't know anything ever. I don't know what I know what a virtual machine is, but I don't know what I don't know what a Hyper-V is. I don't know what a golden image.
Oh yeah.
I do now.
We're definitely mixing a lot of things together. Yes.
Fuck.
Well,
Clausewitz method of testing your software.
Yeah, exactly.
Release engineering. Okay. All right. Anyway, yeah.
No, it's okay. That's exactly right. Yeah. So I'm just prone to throwing people's names out and expecting that people keep up. Sorry about that.
Okay. Military strategist. Yeah.
Military strategist.
Yeah.
That's what you need to know. So, so I think the right way. The reason I bring him up is because he.
Because you can name drop Spolsky and I'd be like, yeah, fucking fog bugs.
Yeah, we could talk about him too. Because in leadership theory of warfare is also a big part of it. There's a military leadership has this military component. There are many people in the current sort of leadership coaching domain who I think wish it were otherwise, but I am okay with it. So I think just to quote Clausewitz really quickly, he was like, war is nothing but a duel on an extensive scale. I'll just paraphrase here.
I like that.
But it goes on. The paraphrase is, it's an act of violence intended to compel our opponent to fulfill our will. And so the calculations involved in war are the calculations of risk, right? I place troops here, or I expend resources in a particular area, and there is a potential risk that those resources are lost or they fail in their mission. And so when Duke Leto says that those things get submerged into other things, my interpretation was that they're by the tactician himself, by the leader, that emotions can take over. And there's tons of great examples throughout military history where that's the case. Your timeline can get overwhelmed, or these certain kinds of errors can lead to can lead to highly emotional situations for
you,
the planner.
do you? Oh, okay. Hold on. This is like a
Yeah.
paradigm shifting moment for me. You think he's referring to? He's basically. Do you think he's basically saying the Harkonnens think I'm now going to overreact because of this, or I'm going to react in a way that is probably to our detriment because of this?
Yeah, but when I do think that that's a
Okay.
fair interpretation, but I also think it's a fair interpretation just because this conversation is plucked out of the air in the beginning. So it starts with quotes, right? The whole theory of warfare is calculated risk, the Duke said. But when it comes to risking your own family, so now it's very close to close to his heart, right? The element of calculation gets submerged in other things. We didn't read the whole intro and we don't have to now, but the pertinent sentence in that group is, "Oh, you who know what we suffer here, do not forget us in your prayers." It's the setup here is that the risk is very fucking close to home. Also, this idea of like we got a simple trick caught us where we were expecting complicated or complex stuff. I think about the OODA loop. I think about John Boyd and his concept of the OODA loop, where what he's exposing is our sense of timing is off. And that's why I brought up the switch from like this very active, like pummeling, focusing on the lower half of the body, and then just jumping on, just literally like, oh, you're all engaged down here. I'm just going to jump on your head, or I'm just going to jump on your arm.
Classic, right?
Classic, right? Classic misdirection.
Right.
So I think what he's saying is there's two things happening here. One is, oh, fuck. Okay. Our sense of timing is a little fucked up. Our risk calculations are now clouded because they struck pretty close to the heart of our system. It's like inside the protected circle. And now you've got Thufir who wants to resign or whatever, and he's like, no fucking way. Am I going to let the consequences of these missteps or these minor errors in this duel? Am I going to let them pull my team apart?
That's good. Yeah, the first way I read it was sort of him lamenting or basically saying, you might not protect your family as much in preparing for this sort of thing as you might try to protect the system, right? The barracks, where the big attack would happen. And it's like,
yeah, I mean,
and I found myself grappling with that because I'm like, well, you also have like a ton of household security and they did the sweep and whatever. And I'm like, it seems like you kind of attempted to thoroughly do kind of all of it,
That's why I think that's because this conversation is between himself and Paul.
Right.
Paul is playing the role. He literally says it. He's like, I should be taking the position you're taking.
Yeah.
So I just interpreted that as father allowing son to lead. Now, it could be that Leto was so pissed off that he couldn't see it and needed that reminder. There's tons of examples where military leaders have gotten fucking bent out of shape emotionally. There's the famous one where Patton slaps that soldier. Right? Like that's not an act of leadership. That's an act of like it's an emotional spiral.
Right.
That he's in. So for those of you who don't know, John Boyd was a Air Force, right? He worked on the F-15 engine, I believe. Anyway, one of the Fs. He fought in the Korean War, and then he gave a ton of these briefings. He didn't write down his theory of war, but he gave it in individual briefings to his team. He did some writing. Synthesis and Analysis is a great paper that he wrote. There's others, but basically he came up with this idea of the OODA loop. And the OODA loop is it's a way to think about the timing of warfare. It is it's almost identical to Toyota's plan, do, check, act system. It's this idea of orientation within a complicated or complex system, and then using learning like a fast learning cycle to change the sense of your opponent's sense of time. And so the best example of the American use of this, we'll get back to Clausewitz in a minute, but the best example of America's use of this idea that I can think of in the moment, again, I did not serve in the military, I'm just a student of military history, is when we went after Saddam Hussein. So there were a bunch of things that we did.
You mean 2003 or a 91? It was 91, right?
Yeah, I think the first.
Yeah. Okay.
So we sent one group that was like heading straight for Baghdad, like at record speed. There was basically what we did is we got inside that dude's head. I would say both times, to be fair, and maybe Junior's war is the better example of the two. But basically, Saddam Hussein lost his sense of time. So some people think like maybe the Republican Guard wasn't that big a deal. They were a big deal. What happened to them is that their military leadership could not, just everything was moving too fast for them. And for us, everything was moving pretty slowly, meaning relative to our opponent, we had a lot of pieces on the board. We had a lot of things going on, and all of that seemed to just play out in regular time. But for Saddam Hussein and his military leaders, they had a million things coming at them, and it was disorienting.
Let's parse this out real quick. When you say maybe the Republican Guard wasn't all that, and then you affirm they were, you're saying the quality of the troops, the quality of the training, like these are people that went toe to toe with Iran for a long time.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And then
the reason you might think that is because we so successfully manipulated their sense of time that their reaction seemed slow, awkward, and just off in a way that made it look like they really I'll go back to jujutsu because it's easier, or any sport. There's this guy called the Professor who plays pickup basketball games. And he just does a lot of these like pump fakes and stuff, and he just leaves people like stuck. And it's the same impact. He's altering their sense of timing, not his own. So people are they're expecting certain things. He fucking fakes them out, and then he just puts the ball in the basket, and they're left standing there like, what just happened? And it makes the opponent look as if they have no skill. But these are not unskilled players. He just gets in their head and gets into this orientation with them that causes time to move at a relatively faster for their opponents, but not for them.
So yeah, I'll make a quick jujitsu analogy as well. So there's a student, obviously within 10th Planet, but very specifically kind of under Marvin Castell's sort of dark arts. His name is Juan. And we've rolled a good number of times recently. And following that program, his relentless attempts at entry, and he's got a good gas tank, and he's a younger guy, and we can take all those things into account. His relentless entry points really start to, I don't know if I'd say overwhelm me, but they exhaust me, and they become a matter of it's now if not now, then when is he going to get a good pass or a leg entry because of it? So what happens is after about 30 seconds of playing this way, where he isn't really getting anywhere, I then turn to a more offensive standpoint. Now, currently, because of experience and what have you, I'm turning that offensive most of the time successfully into now we're playing it the way I want to. But it would sound like his strategy needs to be, I already have the guy reacting. Now, if I can counter his offensive, then I have beaten him in pulling him out of his lair, and now I'm beating him kind of on the ground. So that's basically going to be his mission for rolling with me is getting to that point. Now I have more experience on him to where currently he's at least getting me out of the more reactive style that I like to play. But it's maybe just a matter of time because,
there's
I don't mean to be pessimistic, but at the same point, I'm looking at it strategically and going like, just some of these young guys are whew,
Well, there's
they're
a
starting to
difference
be more
between
challenging every
passing
day.
the guard and attacking it.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's a perfect example. So it's really a question of who moves whose orientation.
Mhm.
That's what the OODA loop is all about, right? Like it's it's how you process information and what you do with it. So if you're purely reactive, he wins. Why does he win? Because it's really like that, like Tim had talked about. It's the point plane theory, right? You're trying to catch every arrow with your hands
Mhm.
versus sort of building a structure to shield yourself from them.
Mhm.
Point versus plane. You um, you may be successful in catching the first one or two, but eventually you're going to get an arrow right in the face, right?
Mhm.
And that's because he's relentlessly attacking at speed, whatever speed he's capable of.
He's fast. Yeah.
Well, and I'll bet you he appears much faster to you than he actually is.
Yeah, maybe.
Because you're anticipating the next attack, and you're maybe even anticipating beyond that. And once that becomes overwhelming, your sense of time has sped up while his sense of time remains what it was to begin with. There are ways to turn that around, right? So someone who's not quite as quick could use pressure passing or other things to change the orientation. Anyway, we don't have to get super deep into this theory. I think these are good examples of what Leto is talking about. So
Yeah.
In this case, Paul is defending Hawat. Paul is giving his father the sort of lecture about the nature of war and warfare, and specifically why he should not get rid of this valuable resource. So I love that we're only like a paragraph in.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But it's a big deal. I think in terms of the book, it's important to know that this is the way it goes.
Yeah.
The first few paragraphs really set the pace, and then the characters start to act out their plans. So there's a lot of information here.
And note for audio editing, we could just remove my entire depending if we wanted to, we could remove my entire thing about me and Juan rolling and save ourselves 5 minutes because we already have some good examples, or we could keep them in, just depends. But wait, one thing I wanted to say, we're obviously going to cover the entire chapter, but in terms of Paul's role, in terms of communicating with Leto in this moment, and then throughout the rest of the chapter, especially some of his insights, because he doesn't really say much from here during the meeting. He plays the role of just silently kind of observing. But he's got a lot of things that he's observing about this meeting that we're about to go into. The chapter ends with him being reminded of the Bene Gesserit's warning. For the father, nothing. He's really recognizing his need to take the reins, or to kind of step up, if you want to call it that. So long story short, Hawat keeping his job.
Hawat gets to keep his job.
Yeah. So real quick, so now it looks like there is a sort of chief of staff's kind of meeting, like his top ranked people are now going to meet, and they're all being pulled into the meeting. There's a reference to there's good coffee, and there's a good spread for them, which was mentioned 4 or 5 chapters earlier, which was the comment that you have to lay out the best hearth of coffee and hearth to attract the best people. So looks like they're true to form. That's a little callback. There's this other moment that Leto, there's a comment Hawat has heard about, a report of obviously someone maybe breaking with him. And he goes, I know who my true friends are, Thufir. And that's another interesting quote here because, he knows who his true friends are. No one who's about to join this meeting has deceived him. Yui would Leto in that moment say Yui is one of his friends? And if he would say that, then he's wrong. But if he would say, no, that's one of Jessica's kind of employees, then he would be correct. So it's a little wordplay, but it's just interesting, the idea that he comments, I know who my true friends are. He is deceived by someone in his household, but Yui isn't in this meeting. He's not in the circle of trust, you could say. So I don't know, from a leadership perspective, you have anything to say about
No,
that?
I think about that a lot. So he's like, he's just ideal, right? He's on the periphery of the core group.
Yeah.
And he's de facto trusted in a way that, as you know from past episodes, it drives me bananas.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It's like in Cantor's book, Reading the Room, which we've also talked about on this podcast. The person who deceives the company, so to speak, was someone who was in all of the leadership meetings we talked about, right? It wasn't someone who, it's like anecdotally, there's 4 or 5 people and 4 people in the room, and then there's like a rumor that someone out in engineering, did some code change that, insider trading, millions of dollars or whatever. So,
well, yeah,
anyway.
I mean, so really, yeah. So just to echo this thing, right? Like the wanting to keep your team whole and especially your core team whole, it's the right instinct. So I think Paul's showing quite a bit of maturity here, even a little bit more than his father at a very sensitive moment.
Yeah.
All right.
So, okay. Did you?
No. We should just move forward.
Yeah. So we're moving along. Leto's like, they're a good crew. A man could do far worse for this kind of thing. So they're all in there. Leto makes a kind of a joke, you could say. We get this again throughout this chapter. We're going to get this sense of omniscience from like the narrator, and then we're going to of the storytelling, and then we're going to get specific things that Paul himself is thinking. And if I'm not mistaken, they're italicized. And so, we get Leto. Sorry, in one chapter we get Leto's thoughts in italics, we get Paul's thoughts in italics, and then we also get omniscient narration. So again, this is an interesting aspect of Herbert's writing. So anyway. He makes a joke. Paul, this is an interesting thing. Paul recognizes that his father had said the precisely correct thing in precise. Why the fuck can't I talk? All right. Paul realized that his father had said the precisely correct thing in precisely the correct tone to lift the mood here. Even the hint of fatigue in his voice was right. So this is Paul recognizing and recognizing what sort of performative leadership looks like. I think you've commented on that before. Let's see. So moving on, and again, like I said, I didn't review this as closely as I normally would have, but stuff with the Fremen, they give gifts, nothing looks suspect. This is the smugglers are doing a little bit more activity. That's because of the chaos or the looseness of this transition. Is this the part where Duke does some mafia shit? Duke does some mafia shit in this chapter where he's like, let's just legitimize the smugglers and that will save them on their security expense, the smugglers' security expenses. And so consequently, they'll happily play ball. We're going to do this completely legally, and we're going to write and I appreciate the detail of the business of this world, in the same way that George R.R. Martin is like, what is Aragorn's tax policy, right? We have a sense, we have a sense of, we have a sense of the idea that basically Leto will bank the entire tithe openly in the name of Shaddam and deduct it legally from our levy support costs. So basically he's like, oh, we're just going to make all this official. We're going to put it on the books and it's fine. We've just legitimized the smugglers. Other people are going to lose income because of this, because they were a part of that, but we're going to be fine. And if anyone complains, again, it's that classic, and it comes up again later with the raiding Gedi Prime to see their hidden spice storage. You can't really complain about a stolen thing or contraband being, if someone steals your kilo of Coke that you were going to make a lot of money selling, who do you fucking tell, right? There's so I digress.
No, it's okay. Just to really quickly to like touch on what we were talking about earlier. And also to just repair some things that I didn't say fully. So Clausewitz, Napoleonic Wars, he saw the French Revolution. His ideas didn't really become super pop. He was a general in the Prussian army. His ideas didn't start to become popular until right after the end of World War I, which is why the first people to really make use of his ideas were the Nazis. But anyway, so I wanted to get that clear. And then in his sort of theoretical framework for warfare, since this is the topic, there are three things that need to happen, three objectives for success in war. The forces of your enemy have to be wiped out. The country that you are at war with must be occupied. And then the will of the enemy has to be broken. Right? These are his ideas. One thing that I see consistently here is a trepidation on the part of, which is I think why we're endeared to them, on the part of the Atreides, to fully embrace those three objectives. It is certainly not in the way that the Harkonnens did. So breaking wills, that's not on their list. Fully occupying the country, that doesn't seem to be on their list. They're looking for ways to work with the indigenous people. And even the breaking the armed forces, I think they had opportunities to really break the Harkonnens, but they, for reasons I don't fully understand, didn't. This is one of the tricks that they're alluding to, right? That trick was only possible because it wasn't like an all-out, when they came in, it wasn't all-out destruction. Yeah. So you asked a question about the prescience of the Bene Gesserit.
You mean in regards to how people would react, like when she says,
nothing for him, right? Yeah.
Oh, sorry, different. Oh, yeah. The prediction for Leto's future. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know that Leto, this might be the wrong fight for him. Leto's a good leader by a bunch of standards, but just judging by like the difference between his leadership style and what Klaus is not the only fucking theorist, but he's ignoring the big three things he has to do, or not ignoring them, but not really willing to embrace them fully. And while that makes him seem like a good and humane person, it definitely brings up questions about would he have been successful, whether there was like some Bene Gesserit curse on him or not. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, I'll make the analogy that it sounds like von Klaus is that's not his name.
It could be. I like that even better.
Oh shit. If that were, let's just put it this way. If that were like if we were talking about two different like Chinese theorists, I would be called racist, but it's German, so who gives a fuck? Where am I going with this? What I'm hearing is von Klaus, will continue to call him.
Yeah,
was saying you need to do a Sherman's March to the Sea, Atlanta to Savannah. You need to crush the will of your opponents, right? That's a Civil War reference. But in this war, right, the Harkonnens, I mean,
they have no problem with this idea.
I don't want to get into the complicated politics of this, right? But America got, I mean, the Viet Cong, like we were not prepared for the Viet Cong, right?
Yeah, whose will got broken there?
Ours.
Our will. Yeah.
Right. I mean, right. So I think that's the analogy I'm trying to make when you're like, this might not have been his fight, and even at his best, it was going to be.
Yeah, it was 2-1, right? Yeah. Like they didn't invade America, but they hit the other two objectives pretty solidly.
Right. So I don't know if there's more you wanted to say though. For this exact.
I'm just my only point is that it's unclear to me whether Leto's leadership would have been enough to secure Arrakis, and I make that claim on the basis that part of what makes him a good leader, is a denial of these objectives.
Yeah. I mean, we've made the Ned Stark Leto analogies before, right? We've definitely said like he's not a man for the politics of King's Landing. He's not a Littlefinger. He's not, I mean, he's definitely not a Tywin Lannister. And us non-reptiles like those characters. We like the people that seem not willing to go there, not willing to be ruthless, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
we want them to win, but
right.
but sometimes the Pyrrhic victory, like we seem to bond to those characters.
Yeah.
Ned Stark was good because he had some kind of moral
Right.
framework that seems better. But then if you examine his actual behavior and the effectiveness of it,
No.
not super effective.
I mean, I think this is like sort of a Christian thing, right? Like it'd be better to just die noble than sin to stay alive or whatever. You know,
Right.
obviously maybe we should talk about the idea that on some level, if the idea is you've lived a good life, then dying according to the Christian religion is not the worst thing in the world. You get the kingdom of heaven. Now, obviously we don't have, I don't want to get into the idea of like jihad in the suicide bomb sense of the term, but like, people go to war or whatever, obviously there were the Crusades, but like, I think this is sort of a Christian theology way of looking at noble characters who don't do evil things. Is it's okay that they die and we bond with them. It's better to do that than be a snake who lives forever.
Best example here is the Civil War. You brought it up, right?
Yeah.
So what was Lincoln's huge mistake?
Yeah.
He allowed the Confederate soldiers to remain in the United States.
Yeah.
What was the gambit? The gambit was he was putting off a prolonged guerrilla war.
Mm-hmm.
According to Klaus Schmidt, what should he have done? He should have broken the Southern Army. He should have invaded the territory.
Mm-hmm.
And he should have broken the will of the people in that territory.
Which Sherman eventually did. Yeah.
Right. No. I mean, Sherman, yes, but yes. And we didn't get all three. We decided to play the Ned. This is a horrible interpretation of American history, but we decided to be the Ned Stark here, or take the higher ground to try to stave off a prolonged guerrilla war.
Mm-hmm.
The result of that is that we are still hashing out. We never really achieved peace. Now, Klaus's theory, not absolute or even correct, right? Like it's a theory. But by his description, that strategy was a failure. And likely this is the kind of decision that Leto would have made. Mm-hmm. It is making. Right. So anyway, so we can continue. I don't need to drag us through too much more.
Yeah. So we find out a lot, like I said, in this chapter, we find out a lot about sort of the I don't want to call it a technocratic chapter, but we found out a lot about the nuts and bolts of kind of the opportunity here. It's announced that the Harkonnens basically made 10 billion a year off of spice here on Arrakis, and that's the stuff that's on the books officially. And this is where, that's huge money. That isn't pack up and go home because the boss said to. So this is the point, Leto makes when he announces this is exactly why we're in this situation. And this is why the Harkonnens aren't leaving. This is why they're coming back. This is big money. And people don't just put that down and walk away. So then we get into the roll call, if you want to call it, of what their inventory and equipment necessary to do the job is. And the Harkonnens pretty much appear to either passively or intentionally have sabotaged the Atreides' ability to get started quickly, right? They have a lot of so let's talk about spice mining in general. You ready for that? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So it's out in the desert, obviously. There's a certain amount of spice. I don't want to get into the ecology of it. That's got to be later. But spice is on the ground. Let's say it's you can see a patch of it, right?
Yeah.
So
imagine if cocaine was just lying on the ground.
Fucking just So
disco would still be very popular.
Yeah. That's funny. And no, never mind. I'll tell you that off. I'm not talking about cocaine. I'm talking about the relevancy of disco. out of time.
Okay.
So basically a carryall is like a giant helicopter that can carry the entire equipment necessary to spice, or to harvest, as they call it, but it's basically more like scooping up the spice, right? So it swoops in, it drops off a spice harvester and a factory. In my mind, the fact that they're, and I can actually take some photos from the Dune Encyclopedia and post them in to Instagram or into Facebook along with it. But in my mind, because they're so tightly integrated, they might as well just be one piece of equipment, but they're separate, right?
Right.
So technically, the harvester is basically sucking up all of the spice and other things that are kind of nearby. It's basically like a vacuum. And then the factory actually goes about separating out the spice from other elements like sand and other materials that were picked up. There's something in the encyclopedia about spice being lighter than sand. So in the factory, there's like fans that blow the spice that kind of then, and it gets whisked away. But it looks almost like a insect, where it looks like a head and a neck.
Show people.
Yeah, that's the, oh yeah, so that's the carryall. So it literally flies in and drops it down on the sand. The sand factory and harvester. Yeah, it looks like a bug, right? So it looks like it has a head, a thorax, and an abdomen.
It vents sand and it retains spice. Yeah.
And so the idea is, for every spice mining mission, you need a carryall, and then you need obviously the harvester and the factory, and then you need a couple ornithopters they're called, and they look for sand, or worm sign rather. Worm sign is kind of like when I was gonna make an inappropriate joke. It's when so the nature of the spice mining or harvesting, whatever you want to call it, the operation is that the very equipment that is necessary for the job attracts the worms. So the steady vibration of the equipment is what attracts the worm, and then the worm will come and eat up and destroy all of the equipment. So you have these ornithopters on the perimeter, right, watching for worm sign, and once they detect it, they can tell about how long you have. Now they try to cut it as close as possible, so they don't just have the carryall come and pick it up as soon as the worm sign. They go, T minus 9 minutes, T minus 8 minutes, so it's all, so it's almost like when they know an asteroid's going to pass by Earth, they say that we have this many days or what have you. So then the carryall comes back, picks up the harvester in the factory, and whisks it away, and that is the spice mining or harvesting activity of the day. So you need a lot of equipment. So for each one, you need, 3 ornithopters, a factory, a harvester, and can a carryall only carry one harvester and factory, or can it carry multiple at once?
That is a great question.
But safe to say, so they have, and you have to think about the scale of this. This is a planetary supply, right? They have
it takes the whole factory. So one single factory.
So so a mission is minimum 3 ornithopters, 1 harvester, 1 factory, 1 carryall. That's one.
Was a standard airfoil single wing craft with remarkable lift. It possessed almost no cargo capacity inside the fuselage, its main purpose being to transport the harvester factory to the spice beds, and once there, stay close in order to effect a rapid evacuation should a worm appear.
Actually, this is a detail that I just actually caught. So they have 930 harvester factories, 6,250 ornithopters for survey, scouting, and weather observation, and then a little under carryall. So in the what's the bottleneck? What's the constraint sense of the term? They have under 1,000. They have the ability to do under 1,000 mining. So I'm gonna keep saying it's to me mining, but I'm gonna keep saying harvesting. So
because that's what it is, right?
Right. That is correct. They can do under 1,000 harvesting jobs at once.
Yes.
That's their limit. They have way more. I mean, again, according to the idea of like 3 ornithopters per mission, they have quite a few more ornithopters than they need. And in terms of the harvester, I mean, it seems like they have almost a 1-to-1 ratio of the factories to the carryalls, which is what the job requires. So there's an interesting, this is to me kind of a throwaway. Halleck says, in reference to the ornithopters, wouldn't it be cheaper to reopen negotiations with the guild for permission to orbit a frigate as a weather satellite? Thufir comments, that's not going to happen. The guild agent was a fellow Mentat, and he basically was letting me know that the price was way out of our reach and would remain so no matter how long a reach we develop. Our task is to find out why before we approach him again. So basically, they were doing a little wink, wink, nudge, nudge of like, there's something else happening here that it's not just, I mean, is it a matter that money can't buy it, or is it? Yeah, I mean, I guess it kind of is.
They're unwilling. They're unwilling to provide it.
Right.
Yeah, they're not.
We'll find out about.
Provide it till later.
Yeah,
they could do it, but they're going to keep moving the needle.
Yeah.
No matter how much he offers, the price is always going to be higher. So they're effectively saying, "Don't bother."
Right. I found this to be a little bit of a throw. Like, this is one of those things that's kind of buried in this meaty chapter, and it isn't until I think much later that you actually come to realize what that actually means, or it comes to fruition, so to speak. So
since I'm on my fucking auto whatever, since I'm on my Klaus Schmidt thing, he talks about the things that limit war as being a kind of friction, and one source of that is uncertainty, chance, and what he describes as logistical or organizational misfortunes. So this is one example. Not having everything you need logistically at your disposal. It's one example of a misfortune or friction in warfare.
Yeah, I mean, you can start
suffering.
Yeah, you can start a two-front war and try to send your troops into Russia and have your supply lines run thin, and then find yourself in a very bad situation and losing the European side of World War II.
Yeah, this is a lesson that's still important for leaders today. Tactics, not the issue, logistics. I can't remember who maybe articulated that the best. It's been said many times by many different people, but an amateur in warfare pays attention to tactics, but logistics are what the experts think about, because you can't survive if you don't have supply lines. Anyway.
Yeah. Fun fact out of nowhere. So the Battle of Hastings occurred in 1066. That was when the Normans conquered the English crown, right? The Anglo-Saxon crown, and thus started the beginning of the Norman era of the Plantagenets. They got stuck in Normandy for a winter. They were supposed to do this invasion before, but they got stuck there for the winter, and there was something like 10,000 pounds of human and animal waste that needed to be kind of disposed of or kept away from the camp during this time that they were stuck there, because there's a lot of disease in human and animal waste. So I'm mentioning this because of logistics, right? You have to think about, if you have a lot of people and a lot of animals, you have to think about waste management. Poop.
That's right.
You really got to think about it.
You really do. So just to give the quote. So the quote's actually more recent than I would have thought, but there are many voices that echo the same sentiment. But it's Robert Burrow. He was a Marine commandant. He said it in 1980. Amateurs talk about tactics, but professionals study logistics.
Yeah.
Poop.
Got to think about it. So important. Can't get it into the water. They go over basically the same thing I went over with the spice mining. There is a moment there where someone asks, or I think was it Paul that asked, but someone asks, could a sandworm eat this entire thing, like the entire factory thing? And Duke gets frustrated that he gets frustrated and then says, no, they have to face the realities here. And basically they say like, yeah, no, all this shit, all of it can get destroyed at the drop of hat. I think this is because they realize I actually, here's a question. Do you have any sense of like, oh, say it's okay, so they have so this is for a planet, right? Well, maybe there's more of a supply in Carthage. I don't know, but I think this is considered the planetary fleet. How many factories and carryalls do you think the Harkonnens had?
That is a great question.
I mean, did they have 3,000 and that's why 900 seems paltry? Is it 10? Did they have 10,000 and that's why 900 seems woefully inadequate? We know that they're only going to be able to get a third of the yield, and I don't know. There's talk about the yield and the profit that they're expecting. They're basically going to be coming in a third or a fifth under what the Harkonnens were doing at their height. This is like in the first period of time, so they're like, it's just not going to be that great of an operation at first, and everyone's going to kind of notice that. Anyway, sorry, I did ask you, do you have any sense of what the Harkonnens probably had?
I think they had much longer, and I think they had destroyed a lot of equipment on their way out. They did not leave. They did not leave things operational. They did as much sabotage as they possibly could.
So 900 isn't very many. I guess that's what I guess
that's the main thing, right?
Yeah. So when people are like, can one of these worms just eat or destroy the entire thing? And the answer is yes. That's a blow to morale, is ultimately the thing here, is they have to face the realities. Paul asking about shielding. They talk about shields and how shields don't work with the worms because it's same as the other stuff, same as the vibrations of the equipment. Shields do the exact same thing. There's a little joke here about the Fremen. The Harkonnens had shields. That's a little bit of a throwaway. We're gonna have to pick that up later. The Harkonnens had shields. They have accounts of them being expended and repaired and stuff, but those don't really come up again in the immediate near future. There's a comment about how the Fremen, in terms of the one-to-one duels where people wear shields, find the idea of wearing a shield to be laughable. I think that's a little bit of like a sense of getting a sense of what the locals are like and their machismo. And Leto disapproves of this joke occurring at this time. But yeah, so morale is dented by the idea that they only have 900 and that they can all be destroyed like that by a worm. They comment, again, they tell the process of getting spice the same as I just did 10 minutes ago. The Duke makes a joke that spice is a matter, or harvesting spice is a process of getting in and getting out with it as much as possible. The Duke tries to make a joke, admirably suited to a Harkonnen morality, and Paul notices, and this is what I love about the writing of this chapter, laughter was abrupt and too loud. So it's basically calling out like this shit's getting awkward and people are trying really hard to keep morale, if you want to call it that. Duke says, I don't like the de-emphasis of shields. I want to know the answer to that. They talk about how they're going to be delivering much less spice proportional. They're going to be getting a lot less money than the Harkonnens also were, but that's just in proportion. Stuff that the prices change. So they're going to be delivering a lot less spice, and then we move into the talk of the Fremen. So when I say this is a big, hairy chapter, it's like we have this entire spice thing, right? The equipment, and then now enter the Fremen and how are they going to be relied on.
I think you would really enjoy the Dune real-time strategy game. So there was, because it's all, this is, I don't remember whether a worm can come and just eat your entire deal. But both, I used to play, so I don't know if we've talked about this, but there are several versions of a board game around Dune, and there have been a couple of video games. The real-time strategy game, as you can imagine, is about mining resources, using those resources to build your troops, and there's a constant like sort of battling. So Harkonnen versus Atreides. In the management of resources in the original Dune board games, it's huge. It makes so it has similar to Risks. It has a lot of elements, and the card game, the board games, sorry, very complicated. I bought us a copy of one of the most recent card games. Hopefully, we'll do it. We'll play. As part of an episode or something. But there's a video game from 2000, and I think it's been updated. I think there's a current version. I haven't played the newest version,
Mhm.
But that game, it's still playable today. Yeah, it's all resource based. Super fun to think about it that way.
Mhm. Yeah,
If you
I like that.
real-time strategy games.
I haven't really played very many. I would be interested in learning how bad I am to start with, and then maybe growing some skill.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, similar to like Red Alert, and there's a whole bunch of games in that genre.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, we
Yeah.
don't have to delve into video games, but
Okay. Do you want to? Yeah. So they're talking about the Fremen, and the idea of this is where. Okay. Okay. So this is where it gets dicey, right?
Mhm.
I think you're gonna have some. I know you said you had some comments about a couple of the leadership things here.
yes,
One of them is the idea that almost all of the families that control the interior trade on Arrakis are understood to be more or less more loyal to the Harkonnens than the Atreides. You know, they're not really interested in the new management. And basically, the Duke said, like, confiscate all their shit, like confiscate all of their property and forge their signatures on documents that say that they swore their loyalty to the Atreides and then double cross them. Thufir, so we get a little bit here. Thufir smiles and says, a move worthy of your grandsire. So Leto's grandfather. It shames me to think I didn't think of it first. Now you have to remember the comment that Jessica made a chapter or two before when she was talking to UA was death and deceit follow Thufir wherever he goes. So this is, there's something about this. This is not what I was expecting earlier in this chapter, or this is not what I was expecting of Leto. Right. Even with the small amount of characterization so far, I was not expecting some of this stuff out of him. And I guess maybe no one else was supposed to. I don't know. I mean, mileage varies, but
well, that's pretty much what Hawad is saying. It's like so the setup is he's tough, he's a good leader, but kind of the dirty work is kept at an arm's distance. But it turns out, no, he's totally capable of doing it. It's just where he directs it. So I think it's interesting, right? He is focused on the common people ish, and holds some of these landed gentry, I guess is the right way to talk about them, in contempt, largely because they support his enemy. So I think what Leto is showing here is a willingness to be be less than moral. So there's a little bit more Littlefinger in him than there was in Ned Stark. So it's the friend of my enemies. Yeah, we fuck those people.
Right.
Yeah. There's a danger here. Oh, the leadership part. So,
and by the way, Paul doesn't like this.
No. Paul would hate
in asterisks, it's wrong. This will only make the others fight all the harder. They have nothing to gain by surrendering.
That's right. And so here's Hackert giving Paul like a lot of fancy talk behind us. So I think this reminds me of this idea. The idea is that we all have an espoused theory of work or of warfare. This is how it should be done. This is how it should be conducted. So what do we know so far about Leto? It's kind of all the stuff we talked about earlier. He tries to be fair and kind, and while he's willing to engage in war, he wants the best outcome for his people, the people on this planet. So that's kind of the perspective we have on him. This is his espoused theory. What is Paul actually concerned with? Is he concerned with hurting the landed gentry?
No,
not at all. Not even a little bit, as we'll see before he gives zero fucks about them.
Yeah.
So what is he actually warning about? He's warning about his father's performative acts of leadership. And then this sort of shadow so there's espoused theory. That's what we say about how war should be conducted, how work should be done, that what the culture should be like, that kind of thing. Then there is our theory in action. And the delta when it's too great, when our actions are too far away from our espoused theory, it creates cynicism, even in people who are like our fans.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say that you're a Silicon Valley executive
Mm-hmm.
and you are talking up all the latest Silicon Valley buzzwords.
Mm-hmm.
You got your team the ping pong table, you like to collaborate, you've got the big open space, you've got all those things, and you are continually talking to your team about your open collaborative environment.
I love
And
it.
then, right, it's very common.
Mm-hmm.
And then your actual behavior is to withhold important information, like right. People ask you questions that are important to get their work done. You withhold the answer or you misdirect, which is a very common thing. Like what people see, they hear the espoused theory. It may even attract them. Then they see the behavior and how contrary it is. And then it makes them cynical. They stop believing that what you say is in any way truthful or valid. And that goes for everything you say. So even when you're telling the truth, people have to do a lot of like cognitive work.
Mm-hmm.
They have to battle their own lived experience, which tells them you're not to be trusted.
Mm-hmm.
This would be the worst thing for a leader, right?
Mm-hmm.
So often it's better to be transparent. It's with ambiguity or with difficulty. Some people think that leading is about easy answers. And I will accuse Leto in part of kind of following that rubric.
Mm-hmm.
He projects a simple, like a simple, by simple, I just mean there's not a ton of moving pieces and parts.
Okay.
He projects a kind of morality that's easy to get by. It's a little bit populist, right? And it's easy for people to get behind. And then somehow he's sparing everybody by hiding the complexity.
Mm-hmm.
But then what people observe when he has to respond to that complexity is, like in this case, then they see a wildly different approach. And then it may cause them to question whether anything he had said, I'm not even maybe, it absolutely will cause them to question it. And so part of what Paul Atreides is talking about here is it's not good, not because it negatively impacts the landed gentry, but because it will change people's perception of Leto because those stories will be told.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes in organizations, they talk about having an open door policy and being transparent.
Mm-hmm.
But then when people get fired and they just disappear, and it never gets discussed. This is a very good example. I see this a lot in organizations. So what do people conclude rightly? That there are a set of hidden rules that can cause you to lose your job.
Right.
And no one's going to be transparent with you about what they are.
Right.
So then every time the leader stands up and talks about the value of transparency, what he gets is groans and eye rolls from his team. And that's the beginning of the end for a leader. Okay. Is that clear?
I think so. Yeah. So enter the Fremen, enter Stilgar. So it took a long time to get here. We did start a little late, so
I think you'd make a good Stilgar. I think they overlooked you for that role. And
thank you. I mean,
send your headshots in.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's true.
Javier Bardem's going to be Stilgar in the new one.
Not as good as you.
Oh, thank you. I love Javier Bardem. I've been a fan of his for about 19 years now.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, from before he had any English speaking roles, I happened to have been
19 years ago.
I was in college. I took a Spanish cinema course. So I saw him in movies before he ever made any English speaking roles. So I was an early, I have an early claim on the talent of Javier Bardem as an actor. And it's because of a Spanish cinema course in college when I was 19, 20 years old. And then he, was Anton Chigurh in No Country for Old Men his first? It was definitely his big breakout English role, but I don't know if it was his first in English. I can't say for sure. But
I wouldn't know, but man, he's good in that movie.
Yeah, he's gonna be great. He's gonna be the shit. So Duncan walks in. Well, Duncan comes in alone, and Duncan comes in, and they have taken a force of Harkonnens. A man got injured. He has a knife. It's the crysknife of fame and infamy, milky white and glowing with a light of its own. It is it's made of the tooth of a sandworm, which we will come to know as Shai-Hulud later. And just as he's about to show it to someone, Stilgar yells out, keep that blade in its sheath. And that is because they have rules about the Fremen. The Fremen have rules about...
This rule is going to get broken 10,000 times and makes me so mad. But yes.
I don't remember those cases, but I look forward to rereading these chapters and finding out when they happen again and again, which is fun for me. It gives me something to do.
Literally, anytime someone takes their knife out and puts it back in without fucking cutting themselves, which happens. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like you do this once as a you do it once or twice just to show, okay, I know the culture. But like, think about all the times you might be like, oh, fuck, I have to cut my hand open again.
Yeah.
I'm going to make spaghetti right now.
Yeah. Right.
I'm just gonna put it away. I need that.
Yeah, so Stilgar enters. This is the first male Fremen that has appeared. Obviously, we had the shutout, but I think because of the importance of gender roles in the role that Fremen men especially play, this is a big deal. This is a Fremen male leader. Paul can see it all over him very quickly. This is a respected man among Fremen. He's got the blue and blue eyes. He's got the still suit. He's got his face wrapped up. Let's see here. We learn about Fremen culture pretty quickly, right? Leto asks, why shouldn't we unsheath this blade? Stilgar glanced at Idaho, said, you observe the customs of cleanliness and honor among us. I would permit you to see the blade of the man you befriended. His gaze swept the others in the room. But I do not know these others. Would you have them defile an honorable weapon? So Leto and his team ain't in yet, right? Duncan earned his right to that, but no one else has yet.
Yep.
Leto introduces himself. Let's hear. He says, would you permit, he basically says, I'm the Duke Leto, so I'm kind of the leader around here. Would you permit me to see the blade? I love this response. I'll permit you to earn the right to unsheath it.
Exactly.
So it's like,
fight?
you can start this process.
Yes.
I remind you, this is the blade of one who befriended you, he says to Duncan. So there's immediate tension in the air now as to how is Leto going to handle these cultural differences with the locals. And Leto, of course, his Leto's, his the people in the meeting, they don't like this. They consider this an affront to Leto, and they're like, who are you to tell Leto how it's going to be? And Leto goes, no. I want to be empathetic and play by your rules. So if I'm not allowed to unsheath it, or if it's not allowed to be unsheathed, that's okay. It'd be cool to learn what it takes, or it would be cool to learn a little bit more about, kind of how things work for you. And so somewhere in here, the tension gets ratcheted up even more when, after this exchange, Stilgar spits on the table. And of course, to people, again, sort of, we can use the Western European concept of this is what Atreides represents. The idea of spitting on a table as a sign of respect is, repugnant to these folks. And so it's immediately, now we're even closer to a fight. Duncan says, think about how sacred fluid is here. That was a sacrifice that this guy just made. And then does Leto spit on the table as well, or he just accepts it? I think he just accepts it. So everyone, so they make peace enough. And there's a moment where Stilgar says, we lost a man. I would like to enlist Duncan. There's talk about, can Duncan split his loyalties between the Fremen and the Atreides? And Stilgar says, it's been done before. Liet serves two masters. And okay, fine. If it's good enough for Liet, which we don't know who that is or what that means yet, then it's good enough for Duncan. And the agreement has been made that occasionally Duncan will have to come back to do things that the Atreides need and vice versa, and that they're all going to be okay with that. They've exchanged the body of Duncan for the water of the fallen friend of Stilgar. And the assumption is that they will treat the body correctly after they leave. Turok was his name. Remember that when it comes time to release his spirit, you are friends of Turok. So that is that. And Duncan leaves. Well, sorry. Leto wanted to invite him to stay and learn him more. Stilgar says, is there a reason to stay? The Duke says, we would honor you. And Stilgar says, honor requires that I be elsewhere soon, and leave. So super alpha vibes, some mysteriousness.
Yeah. And the introduction of an honor-based culture.
Yeah.
Right. Which is not exactly the world that either the Atreides or the Harkonnens operate in.
Yeah. Right.
I think the Duke thinks himself a principled and honored person, but compared to a Fremen.
Yeah. Not quite there.
Nah.
And so this is where, so Duncan sticks around for a minute after Stilgar walks away. And it's like, is this what they're all like? Yes, I think that's a pretty good representative. And we again, more analysis, like how many people were there in this sitch, or where Stilgar came from? Probably 10,000. There's many of these communities. That's how there end up being way more Fremen than the Harkonnens think. Did they have shields? Where were they hidden? So yada yada. There's talk about this chapter is so fucking long compared to others.
Right? It really is.
Yeah. So there's talk about, is there any treachery or anything that's unexpected? And Duncan says, I don't think they were hiding. I don't think they were hiding anything that I couldn't see. So I think their reports they are what they look like. Then there's talk of what's the importance of the knife. The knife will get you into any Fremen community. Yeah. And as long as you have the blue and blue eyes and you have the knife, and that's where they remember, Peter DeVries, the Mentat that is in the Harkonnen employ, would be able with this knife. So sorry, there's a bounty to $1 million to anyone who can get one of these knives off planet. They can get it to Peter DeVries. The person who gives it to him will get $1 million. Peter DeVries can then enter any Fremen community, rather.
Yes.
And then yada yada yada. There's some talk about who's Liet or who's Keen's, and it's Keen's Liet. And they're like, what does it mean he serves two masters? Gurney says that sounds religious. And then finally we get to we're getting towards the end here. There is a comment. Liet is the name that the Fremen used to say he serves two masters. Gurney thinks that sounds like it could be a religious figure or literally a person, but Gurney says sounds more religious than anything. Then they talk about the planetary ecologist, who's also the emperor appointed like minister of change, or the magister of change, of the changing of the guard from the Harkonnens to the Atreides. That his name is Keen's. And we who have read this book know that's the same person, Liet Keen's. And Liet is his Fremen name. That's not his real name. So where am I going with this? So much detail packed into this chapter. It's insane.
Especially at the end.
Turns out that there are basically like botanical testing stations. They're places where there's equipment in them, equipment that the Atreides could use, probably the type of tools that would be used to repair equipment as well. It's this whole thing, and there are several of them. And we learn that they are, for whatever reason, that Keen's, who is an Imperial servant, has some sort of a relationship with the Fremen. And the Fremen really, these desert botanical testing stations are very important to them. And Leto wants to confirm that, well, he says, I want them. And there's like an outcry of like, there's a fight between him and Thufir saying, don't do that. It will turn the Fremen against you. It will also be a direct order against the emperor, because it's the Imperial property. And Leto says, this is just such interesting, unexpected things from Leto. Again, we didn't have much on him to go on before this, but it's just, you get, they cut a quick, you get a quick image of him and then it's immediately distorted. Leto is like, I don't care. The emperor's far away. How's he going to enforce it? I want them. Yeah. Thufir insists, like, no, please don't do this. And then Leto ultimately backs down and goes, okay, really, I just said I wanted to confirm they existed. So we just need some intelligence about that. Yeah. He then sends Gurney off on a planetary raid to the Harkonnens' planet of Gedi Prime to look at their spice storage, right? Or their like secret stashes. This is what I was referring to earlier, the idea that if you have something that is contraband or stolen and it gets destroyed, there's nothing you can really say or do about it, right? If someone steals your kilo of coke that you were going to sell, you lost it, right? You can't go to the cops about it. And then anyway, finally, we're getting towards the end. There's been this little tete-a-tete or a disagreement. Leto backs down and they end the meeting. And Paul is looking at this and going, whew, just like this chapter, this didn't go, maybe just like this episode. No, I think we did an okay job of this episode. But this didn't go well. There was confusion. Every meeting previously ends with a real sense of purpose and some like high morale. And holy shit, my father's desperate. He's doing un-Leto-like thing. Maybe that's kind of actually the thing here, is this actually isn't what Leto's normally like, but he doesn't know how to respond to these situations. So he responds in this way. And it's not, these aren't good choices. But so Paul's like, my father's desperate. Things aren't going well for us at all. He looks at Duke and Duke's like, stay here, get some rest, whatever. And the Duke is pacing. Paul reflects on him as looking like a caged animal. And he considers for the first time ever that aside from the Bene Gesserit's warning that they might not do so well, and then remembers the Bene Gesserit warning itself, which is for the father, nothing. He also makes a comment that the space had been empty even before the Duke left the room, that he's not fully there. So a lot at the end. I know you had leadership comments about things like the seizing the botanical stations, and also maybe I know I think you had a comment about that as well, and sort of maybe ending the meeting with an open disagreement between key stakeholders, key trusted people. So anyway, that's the chapter. Jeff, any comments you want to make?
Well, I think we're getting set up to view the Fremen in a way that I think is deceptive. Mm-hmm. So I think we're getting set up to view them as and they are very capable warriors, mm-hmm. but as this sort of this stoic warrior group. But in fact, what we're meeting is an agrarian society. Mm-hmm. It's just not immediately clear, because the thing that they're cultivating the most are the preconditions for the agrarian society they're trying to build, right? Mm-hmm. So the thing that they have become the best at gathering, collecting, and essentially farming is water. But that's just the beginning of their plan, right? Mm-hmm. They have a larger goal in sight. Can I think when people think of the Fremen, they think of them as this as this warrior culture, which is not wrong, but it can get us set up for. I think there's going to be a long conversation about this. Go ahead.
We've talked about the show Vikings on History, right? Which I was a huge fan of. I think they were like kind of, I don't know, they did the extended season thing. So let's just say there was a season in the middle that was it was like 20 episodes that weren't really needed. But whatever, right? They keep renewing the show because the ratings and the advertising money and all that stuff. Where am I going with this? Started great, ended great, little bit of fat in the middle. But where am I going with this is Ragnar Lothbrok, his whole thing was he was a farmer who was mm-hmm. like, there's got to be better farmland.
Yes.
And then the idea was, England's got really good farmland. They did raids, they did this, blah, blah, blah. But it was like, it was basically bringing a king to his knees and then going, now that we have you here, give us land to farm.
That's right. That's right. The
Actually,
the-
I'll
and
go.
the-
I'll go one step further and say, so
Yes.
I've had the privilege to go to Scandinavia. I've been to Norway and Sweden, and in Stockholm there is a Vikings museum,
Mhm.
and of course
been there.
oh, really? Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, they debunk myths like, of course, everyone knows the horned helmet is stupid or whatever, but a lot of it really focuses
I
on
got to tell that dude who was partying in the Capitol, but
yeah.
anyway.
they really emphasize the idea of how agrarian the society actually was, with like a very small percentage of people going out and raiding. Anyway, long story short.
Oh yeah, and so I think we have this idea. There's a lot to talk about here, so I don't.
Did you go to the Museum of Vodka when you were there?
I did not go to the vodka, but I did go.
It's literally like a block away from the Viking Museum. Yeah. Anyway,
I went to the ABBA Museum.
Oh, yeah.
Where there's a phone booth outside,
the
phone number to which only the members of ABBA know, and they sometimes call it. Yeah, so if it rings and you're there, pick it up. It's going to be one of the remaining members of the band. Also, there's that ship,
the Vasa.
Oh,
yeah.
There's so much to talk about there. Anyway,
engineering fuckery. Whew.
Yeah, I gave a talk. Spotify invited me out this many years ago to talk about software development and people, and so it was a great trip. I really enjoyed it. Anyway, okay, so that's where I learned about the Sami people and the.
Yes.
Okay. Anyway, what was I saying? So we have this idea that these groups, these stoic, principled groups of warriors, will beat out overly civilized groups. And so the idea, really, this idea, like it's tied to this conception we have around the fall of Rome, where basically you get so civilized that you're like fat, dumb, and happy. And then these people from the outskirts who've been living in the difficult places, who are principled and fortified, they will come in and win. But there's almost no historical, there's almost no actual proof that that's a real thing. As a matter of fact, it's the opposite. So back to our conversation at the beginning of this deal about the importance of logistics, it turns out to be the opposite. So a small agrarian society, a small, significantly developed agrarian society, often just beats out the people who live in the shitty parts. Now, there is a motivation for the people living who have shittier land to attack the people with better land, but history sort of overwhelmingly shows that the folks who are established, the established farmers, tend to do better in warfare. So it is, I think, a misread of Fremen society. I mean, we'll talk about what's in the Sitchas later, but there's a lot more than just water in there, right?
Yeah.
It's
not very clearly stated either. There's a lot left to the imagination of what might be in there.
Yeah, I think especially in the first three books,
something equivalent to kindergarten. We know that.
Right, that's about it, right? And we imagine it's like, it's like junior terrorist school or something.
Yeah.
You're what do you learn in kindergarten? You learn like aggressive knife fighting.
Right.
But not too aggressive, as we've discussed. You don't want to sweat.
Right.
But yeah, so you basically, and you learn some like moral honor code or whatever.
Yeah.
But the truth is there's all sorts of jobs to be done. They're producing quite a bit. So these artifacts of their warriors are the warriors and their artifacts are what we're initially introduced to, and it's what is most commonly presented. But as we go through more of the books and we see more of the world, what we slowly find is that in fact their whole communities, they're very well established, and they're producing quite a bit. The still suits being one of the main things, right?
Right.
But their whole agrarian effort is aimed at turning the desert into essentially farmable land.
Right.
So they start by being farmers of water.
Right.
Okay. I mentioned that because we're going to go back and forth with this quite a bit. Paul's going to, he's going to do his jam, and it's really going to play up the war-like nature of this group.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not, and that may or may not be a good thing for it. But anyway,
it's also worth mentioning the Fremen's plan for their future is completely hidden from anyone other than the most in the know sources. This is not something that they're advertising in any way.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
All right. Any comments about the I want those bases and the conflict, or I mean, or it is what it is. We've already kind of talked about Leto's situation and what have you.
Well, I mean, yeah, if we could talk about it, like, I'm not sure what there is to talk about. So of course, he wants anything that appears to be of strategic value.
Right.
As we know right now, well, as you and I know, maybe our listeners know too, he has very little time to acquire those additional resources.
Right.
So my read on it, the first time I read it, and it's still my read on it right now, is that honestly, Leto bit off more than he could chew.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He let himself, this is a Ned Stark moment for sure. And he just, I think, completely, he has some insight into the way things are, but he also had some big blind spots.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, I think, related to the descriptions of the grandfather. There's that part, the bravura, this idea that he's very confident and bold.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, the lesson of the grandfather is he got gored by whatever that bull was, right? Like whatever that thing.
Actually, this is the part hold on. This is the part that's confusing, actually.
Yeah.
He's saying, like your grandsire, his father was the one who got gored. So that's what
I'm saying. I'm saying there.
Oh, his grandfather might have been even more hardcore.
Yeah, there's an element in this line of leaders that is focused on acts of they're like external acts of bravery or willingness to commit, and we've been given a few examples where they didn't exactly work out for those individuals.
Right.
And we're in the middle of one right now.
Right.
So his hatred for the Harkonnen, the Atreides' hatred for the Harkonnen, led them into a battle that they could not from their own side win or even sustain. That's an important problem to consider even now. So back to our jujitsu thing, you ever just think you're going to be fine, and then very quickly you're like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh fuck.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Today I should have ducked this guy.
Yeah.
I missed my chance to avert my eyes.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, what's happening right now. And Leto is very slow to recognize it because I think he's very full of that kind of confidence. So confidence for sure is a key leadership skill, but self-awareness also a requirement.
Right.
Delusion is not necessarily a fantasy. It's just an incorrect perspective or understanding that is hard to dislodge or displace. And I think he is deluded about his ability to win this fight. And I think Paul is increasingly seeing that. Yeah. But his group, they're so loyal. I think they're missing it. Like Thufir should be more on it. His mistake, the overall significance of that mistake, it seems to be centered on the fact that Paul was almost killed. But the real truth is, it's that they were able to strike so closely at the heart of their core circle. That's the real problem. Like that, it's Paul to the parent, of course, is important. But the real issue is, with almost no effort, I know, we'll seal a guy up in this wall. Yeah. Let's see if that works.
Right.
And right. Sure enough, nearly works.
Right.
So, I don't know if this makes sense to you, but the real problem here is that bravura, that cocksureness, that that sense of rightness will prevail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's a significant problem here.
Yeah.
And like I said, we're gonna be given a perspective on the Fremen that is not. I mean, it will serve for a little while, but it's not exactly correct.
Right.
So I just wanted to say that this is a good place to tee that up, because everything we've been shown so far is these people willing to die for their honor, the shout out Mapes and others, like everything is like honor based, and that's okay. It just gives a perspective, like they're Spartans.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly what it did. Right.
Yeah. And
Right.
The myth of the Spartans, the myth of 300, I think it was like 10,000 or more.
They had people. Well, it was 300. I think it was 300 Spartans, but they also had people from other Greek city states.
Yeah, many.
Yeah, the Thebans and
yes.
places for Corinthians and stuff like that. So
and anyway, there's the myth of, and I don't want to go. This is your culture, so I'll let you speak to it. But there's this perspective that this small group of like stoic, dedicated warriors will somehow overcome this larger group.
Yeah.
But
it's like they held them back for a while in a tight gap where, it's like when you fighting upstairs, like, you can only go like 1-to-1 or like, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So I don't want to take anything away from that effort.
No,
it's a misread.
It was a brave self-sacrifice, but it was mostly that,
And that's like the key thing here. So is this a brave self-sacrifice? Does Leto know that, right? Or is he entering this because he's so fucking sure that he can beat the Harkonnens? My bet is that's what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was overly confident.
Yeah.
And so kind of foolish. And now he realizes, fuck. So now we need the Fremen. We need additional resources to win this battle. The worst time to find that out is when you're isolated on this hostile planet. Right. It would have been nice to know all this before you sent your entire family down there.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Like and subscribe wherever you listen to this podcast. And to hear more readings, become a Patreon supporter at Patreon/Decode Podcast.